Ki-Teitzei lefonecha baderech. The Torah in Parshas Ki-Teitzei describes a highly unusual and maybe even unlikely scenario, nevertheless gives it extremely significant spiritual blessings. What is this mitzvah about? So the Torah says in 2 psukim, a person is going for a walk, say in the forest, in the field, and he sees a kosher bird, mother bird, sitting on the eggs in the nest, and he's tempted to take the eggs and the bird. And the Torah allows us, of course, to shecht kosher animals and eat them, and to have an omelette of, say, pigeon eggs for breakfast. Why shouldn't he do this? There is nothing in Hilchus Kashrus which prevents him from helping himself to these animals, which are in fact hefka. They are ownerless. They're in the field, in the forest. Says the Torah, a very interesting halacha. Lo sikacho eimah labonim. You're welcome to take the eggs, but you can't take the mother bird and the eggs. Shaleach to shalachas ha'eim. You must, with a flick of the wrist, you send away the mother bird, and then you can take the eggs. L'man yitav loch v'orachta yomim, and for that you get a schar ba'olam hazeh and ba'olam haba. A most amazingly, seemingly almost trivial, insignificant act, and yet so much is attributed to this small but beautiful mitzvah. What is really going on here? So first of all, Rashi tells us the name of Chazal, a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, that actually this is the beginning of a list of several mitzvahs, one seemingly disconnected from the other, but they're all connected in a hidden way. Mitzvah gereres mitzvah means that seemingly disconnected mitzvahs are each one of them a portal for another mitzvah. But that's really a subject for a separate shir. The mitzvah gereres mitzvah principle really in modern terms means that just like every cell of the body, like the cells of the body are different. There are muscle cells and brain cells and blood cells, all sorts of different cells, but actually each cell contains the entire DNA for the entire body. So every cell really connects to the entire system. In a similar way, every single mitzvah in some way is specific, that it's one particular mitzvah, blow the shofar, eat the matzah, sit in the sukkah, etc. But it's connected in millions different ways, potentially, to all the other mitzvahs, because all the mitzvahs in some way constitute one organic whole. That is really a very important yesod of mitzvah, gereres mitzvah, which appears in Rashi on the pasuk of Ki-Teitzei kansipo lefonecha. But there are here some very, very fascinating themes which surface. One of them is, two of my favorite perushim on this. The first one comes from the Sforno. The Sforno, one of the great Rishonim, says that there's something very interesting going on here, and if you understand this properly, this is really connected to very modern ecological thinking. He says, Yesh bezeh gemilus chesed lahamon. When you do this, by sending away the mother bird and only taking the eggs, you're doing an act of chesed to whom? It's hefka. There is no recipient of the chesed. To whom are you doing a chesed? So he says you're doing a chesed to mankind. Sometimes, usually chesed has a direct recipient. You're doing chesed to somebody in need. Somebody needs a piece of advice, somebody needs a financial loan, somebody needs a gift of tzedakah. That's chesed where we know the recipient, or at least we have an idea of the recipient. But here we have a principle of Ki-Teitzei kansipo lefonecha, says the Sforno, where the chesed you're doing is to the future of mankind. What does he mean by this? So he goes on to explain. He says it's true that we're allowed to take the animals which are kosher and to shecht them for human use. That's certainly true, he says. But we have to make sure if we take the mother bird and the eggs, symbolically what's happening here is we're cutting off a whole part of the production of nature itself. In other words, if you need wood, you're allowed to chop down a tree. But if you chop down the entire forest, what you're left with is wasteland. Right? If you need fish, you're allowed to fish in a lake. But if you take all the fish from the lake, then the next generation is left with an empty pool. And this is called, in modern ecological term, sustainable forestry or sustainable fishing, where you keep in mind that even though there's no real reason why you shouldn't take as much as you possibly can, but you don't. And this is the principle of self-restraint, that you don't take from nature or in any or from anything in this world. You don't take as much as you possibly can. You take hamistapek b'muat. You take what you need, and you leave the rest for whom? For next generation, for other people, for individuals, for nature to continue. And all this is contained, says the Sforno, in the wonderful mitzvah of Ki-Teitzei lefonecha baderech, to tell you that let the mother bird go away and lay some more eggs. And by doing that, you're showing you're acknowledging your responsibility for future generations. You're acknowledging a responsibility for ecology and for the whole of nature to be able to sustain itself in the future. And this is a remarkable principle which is contained in this seemingly trivial but very significant and poignant mitzvah of two psukim in the middle of Parshas Ki-Teitzei, and to which the Torah tags on L'man yitav loch v'arachta yomim, that a person is ochel peroseim b'olam hazeh v'akeren kayemes elam haba. This is one parish of the Sforno which I find extremely significant. Another parish which I find particularly significant is that of Shamshon Raphael Hirsch, who says that what we're dealing here with is something sacred, and that is as follows. It's very, very interesting. He says that actually, here's a question. When you approach the nest, the mother bird sees you approaching. Why doesn't she fly away? The answer is she doesn't fly away because built in to the nature of the mother bird is the maternal instinct. The maternal instinct that bonds the mother bird to her eggs is one of the yesodus, one of the principal forces that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has put into the world, both the animal kingdom and into mankind. That bonding between mother and child, that is something without which mankind could not exist and would have no future, and that is really lies at the heart of human existence. And if you approach the nest and the mother bird is driven by her maternal instinct not to escape, and you take the mother bird for your own self, what you're doing is you're abusing her maternal instinct. You're abusing it. Because what she's doing really, she's allowing herself to be taken simply because of her desire to protect the eggs. And this is one of the Yesodos Habriya, that connection between the mother and the child, that is in a sacred element of the Bria. Of course, if you listen to atheistic biochemists who don't have no appreciation of God the Creator or of the Yesodos Habriya, and have no appreciation of the neshama of a person and of the spiritual meaning of life, so they will tell you it's all just oxytocin, it's all just chemistry. Now, we're not denying that there is oxytocin connecting a mother to a child, but that's just the mechanics of it. But the deeper source of it and the real energy behind the bonding between mother and child is actually one of the Yesodos Habriya, one of the principles on which the world is based, and this is something mentioned by Shamshon Raphael Hirsch in a very beautiful way on this pasuk. Of course, thirdly, the Ramban says, Yesh b'dova hazeh soid. The truth is that this mitzvah has a very deep mystical, Kabbalistic significance, he says, in the Medrash of Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakoneh, one of the great Kabbalists, early Tanai Kabbalists, that there is something really specially significant here in terms of the mother and the bird, the mother and the eggs, the symbolic Kabbalistic meaning, which is a subject maybe possibly for another shia. But certainly you have here a seemingly simple and trivial a moment in a person's life where with a flick of the wrist, right, this is what's called a mitzvah kala. It's often brought down as the easiest of all mitzvahs. You're not really giving away anything, because this mother bird and the nest, this was all hefker, was ownerless, and therefore you're not like actually giving up on anything, you're just exercising self-restraint. What I find is interesting, and I haven't really got time to develop this, but it's interesting that this parsha, that a little bit of self-restraint and concern for the ecology and for mankind, that has got such a significant value. It is a very fascinating contrast to the beginning of the parsha, where we find the Ben Sora Umora. The Ben Sora Umora is the rebellious son who, the Pasuk says, deserves a death penalty, but about which Chazal said in Sanhedrin, Ayin Aleph, where the Gemara there says, Ben Sora Mora Lo Hoyov Lo Osid Lios. This is a halacha that was never meant to be applied in practice. It only contains, so the Gemara says, if so, why is it mentioned? Derosh v'kabel schar. Read the Parsha Ben Sora Mora and you will learn principles of life, ideas of life, ideas of absolute divine justice, which are not applicable in a human world of the frailty of the human nature. And therefore, we find that, but what is the yesod of the Ben Sora Mora? The Ben Sora Mora is judged, for a capital offense, but what he hasn't done anything which is of a capital offense, but we judge him on the basis that he's incapable of exercising any self-restraint at all. He's completely what we might call today addicted to his own self-gratification, and anything that stands in his way, he will get rid of. He has no moral constraints and no moral boundaries to the exercise of his self-gratification, and he is totally in the grip of his taiva. And Chazal say a person like that will eventually certainly become a murderer, become a destroyer of life, because he has not got this all-important, crucial ability of self-restraint. So I find it interesting that in Parshas Ki-Teitzei, we have here, if you like, a point and counterpoint. In this whole list of 74 mitzvahs of Parshas Ki-Teitzei, we have in the beginning the Ben Sora Mora, who is the ultimate in the lack of self-restraint, and then we have the Kantzipah Lefonecha, which is, if you like, a beautiful example of a very subtle degree of self-restraint, which is acknowledging the importance of the creation itself, of the future of the creation, and of his concern for mankind. And that is part of the Kedusha of the Torah, that he gives us these messages which are built into the mitzvahs, Derosh v'kabel schar. If we learn every mitzvah to its depth, we will discover the Torah's Hashem Tamima, the real depth of understanding of the Torah, and in that way we'll be able to engage with that bracha, Ki Heim Chayenu V'Orech Yameinu V'chein Yiratzeh.